Hey guys, this is Kendall Terry, and this is a look at the circulatory system for AP Biology. So we get started here. We're going to look really, the focus of this is on the evolution of the circulatory system. That's really where the new AP design seems to be going, is understanding the pieces and parts of those systems that we're going to look at in the body, but really understanding the evolution of those systems, kind of a comparative study, if you will, and then you can go more detail in these in an anatomy physiology class or something like that if you want to get in more detail on these body systems. So for this particular lesson, what we're looking at is a comparison of circulations, vertebrate circulation, and then what we look at in mammalian blood, as well as this will be the same sort of things you're going to see in other blood supplies, but we're going to focus primarily, the discussion we're going to have on blood will be mammalian blood. So let's look at, first off here, vertebrate circulatory systems. Invertebrate circulatory systems. We really have, this is kind of the stepping stone to evolutionary process. You've got the first of a no circulatory system, then you go from no circulatory to open circulatory, from open circulatory to closed circulatory. Let's look at that. So here we've got the no circulatory system. These, of course, are animals, if you will, that exist in nature that have to get their nutrients to the cells in their body, which is really what your circulatory system's job is. So when we're looking at this, we have organisms here, the cnidarian, the sponge, over here platythelminths, which you can't see real good, but we might be able to, there he is, platythelminths. Let's see if I can go back now. Oh no. There we go. So you've got a simple system that bathes cells in nutrients from the digestive tract. So when you're looking at, for instance, a sponge, you've got water, which is their primary source of that movement, is going to be water, is going to pull substances into the sponge, and then when it's inside of the sponge, you have all of these stinging cells and things like that inside of here that are going to then capture the food particles and that sort of thing, and allow those food particles then to be sent to really just a couple layers of cells there in the sponge. Same here with the cnidarian, the hydra. You've got the gastrovascular cavity, food's brought in, dissolved here, and you can see there's not very many layers. There's really only 2 layers of cells there. So whatever's absorbed is absorbed directly right into the organism itself. So you don't need any kind of system that's circulating those nutrients from one part of the body to the next that we do in mammals. Same with the platythelminths here. That one gastrovascular cavity kind of stretches the whole organism and is close enough to all the cells that it bathes them in the stuff they need. Next would be that open circulatory system. Now, in the open circulatory system, this is what we see in insects. And in insects, we have a heart. You can see here, in fact, there's several hearts all along the back here. If you look real close at that picture, you'll see that there's more than one heart. These hearts have openings, and as they pump, they'll pull in liquid and push out liquid. And that liquid that right here is called hemolymph. Hemolymph is it's kind of like a blood extracellular fluid mixture all rolled into one. So it's pushing that blood to these cavities in the body, as those cavities in the body hold the organs and other things that insect is using for survival, be it a digestive tract or the tracheal systems or whatever it is it's using, and it will bathe those cells in this hemolymph. And as it does that, it's helping to move those nutrients around the body. So as those hearts, and I'll say hearts because if you look right here, there's a line of them right there. I'll remove the drawing. That was not good. So if you look right here on this picture, you'll see there's actually several different hearts right there that'll all be pumping and pushing that hemolymph, not necessarily blood, we don't call it blood here, that hemolymph to all the parts of the organism. Then we've got the closed circulatory system. So hopefully you're seeing the progression here. And as you do this, you're also getting more complexity in the organism. Now, In this case, we're looking at a worm, but the next examples that we're really going to make the leap with are much more complex than the organisms we've looked at so far. So here now, you'll see that the heart is pushing blood through a system of arteries and vessels that keep that blood actually contained. It's not just being bathed over organs anymore. And you'll have these small branches, kind of like the early capillary type idea, where you separate that blood out. You take a big hole and you make it into a bunch of small holes so that as that blood comes through, it really has to kind of slow down and it has to go kind of single file, and it allows then the nutrients and metabolic waste and all these different things that happen in the blood to be either carried to or brought away from the organism. Now, one of the main things that this is going to use is it's going to then provide for the ability to breathe outside of being surrounded by liquid. And you can think back to the respiratory system for those steps that you need to make there concerning the evolutionary processes involved. The next would be the vertebrate circulatory system. So now we're going to make that leap from just getting to the evolution of the closed circulatory system to looking at now the vertebrates. So we've looked at invertebrates and how those have come along, but now let's make the leap to the vertebrates. So as we leap to the vertebrates, we end up with much larger organisms. If we're dealing with larger organisms, then we're dealing with organisms that they, one, need a good supply of air, and they need that air to be taken to all parts of the body, oxygen to all parts of the body. So the circulatory system had to advance a way to get that oxygen primarily to all the parts of the body. Now, you've also got other things that it's doing there as well, but that's one of the main focuses here, and you think evolutionarily that is what got us out of water, is being able to provide a way for that oxygen to be brought into the system, processed, and taken to all parts of the cells. So we're going to start first with fish in water, and then we'll gradually make our way out. So when you're looking at fish, you've got a two-chambered heart, the evolution of a true chambered pumping heart, where there's an area that blood is brought into, the atrium, and then from the atrium sent to the ventricle. You can see in the picture right here that the ventricle is a much bigger, of course we're looking right here right now, the ventricle is a much bigger muscle because it's going to pump that blood then to all parts of the fish. Now this is just a single loop that you can see that here. Of course it goes to the gills first. At the gills you have that respiratory exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide. So now the oxygen-rich blood is going to be carried to all parts of the body, and you'll have these systemic capillaries back here in various parts of the body, not just right here. This is just a simplified view. Those systemic capillaries will provide that exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide again, and then that carbon dioxide or oxygen-poor blood brought back to the heart. So you've just got this one loop that's going around in this picture, and that is, so you went from the closed circulatory system, which was a simple loop, to now you've incorporated the important part of this loop being the lungs, because without those lungs, you're not getting oxygen to all parts of the body. So this is a process that allows all the cells to not have to be bathed with oxygen-rich liquid, because they're getting the oxygen from the blood that will bathe those cells at the capillary sites. Next we have the amphibian. In the amphibian you've got a double circulation. So now we have the advancement, not only is it closed, but now we've got the advance of a double circulation system. So now you've got a pulmocutaneous circuit, because they breathe both through lungs and through skin. So you've got a pulmocutaneous circuit from the from the ventricle. This is a three-chambered heart, and you can see that here. So let's start that kind of all over so that I don't confuse you too much, hopefully. So you've got oxygen-poor blood coming into the right atrium. That oxygen-poor blood goes to the ventricle. Now, here's the issue here. There is no separated ventricle in amphibians. There's just one chamber there. So as that heart pumps, of course, the oxygen-poor blood's coming in on this side. So a lot of that oxygen-poor blood does go through the pulmocutaneous circuit, where it will pick up oxygen-rich blood, come back to the left atrium, get pumped into the ventricle, and then as that ventricle pumps, it will pump oxygen-rich blood to the systemic circuit of the body. So you do have a true double loop, but that double loop is not separated at the heart. The heart has no division here. It's only got 3 chambers, 1 chamber for the ventricle. So that's going to be another evolutionary advance that has to take place to get to that next step. So let's look at that here. So now we make that next leap, the reptilian. So now we've gotten reptilian. We've got primarily, this is still considered a 3-chambered heart in most reptiles, right here. And you can see the ventricle does have a partially deviated septum there that will at least provide some push for that oxygen, poor blood, to go through the pulmonary circuit. But it's still not a true division of those 2 circuits. You do have a pulmonary circuit and you do have a systemic circuit, but there is some mix that takes place. You can see that right here. Some mix of that blood. So you still got a little bit of oxygen poor blood mixing into that systemic circuit, so it's not fully developed yet. Now we see that full development almost in the reptiles that we call the crocodilians, and that would be what you see right here. So when we look at the crocodilian heart, here it is whenever it's in normal state, and you can see for the most part there is no there's no opening between the 2 ventricles. However, during diving, the crocodilians will allow an opening to develop in the ventricles. It does this on its own, obviously, and allows oxygen poor blood to go through the circuit that goes to the stomach and the small intestines. So this helps in their diving capabilities, slows down some of the digestion and things like that are going on inside of the crocodile during diving. So it mixes that blood for a particular purpose, but for the most part, there is a completed 4-chambered heart. All right, and then the final one is the mammalian and bird. Now, in the mammalian and bird, we see the presence of a true 4-chambered heart. We see a completely separated 2-loop system. So now we have oxygen poor blood coming into the atrium, from the atrium to the ventricle, from the ventricle to the pulmonary circuit, and then we can zoom in a little bit on this. From the pulmonary circuit back to the atrium, this would be the left atrium now, left ventricle, and then to the systemic circuit. So now we have a true closed-off system that is 2 loops, 1 loop to get oxygen, 1 loop to provide oxygen for the entire body. So you've got an evolutionary process there that you really need to go back and look at again and look at each step along the way, be able to discuss what was the adaptation that had to take place, what was the significance of that adaptation, what did it allow that organism to be able to do. So now you've got to dig deeper here to really do the connections that have to take place. Final one is looking at the components of the blood. First is what are the functions, then the 2 main types of blood, plasma and formed element. So let's go ahead and look at that. The functions. The function of the blood is primarily 3 main functions, and I can highlight these for you possibly right here. The first is transport, the second is regulation, and then the third is protection. And we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about these. Transport, of course, we've talked about this, oxygen attached to the hemoglobin, nutrients in the plasma, metabolic waste. So we've got to transport things throughout the body. The blood is the supply that we use for that. And then you have regulation. Transports regulatory hormones from endocrine glands and temperature regulation through blood vessels near the surface. This is one of those homeostatic mechanisms that the circulatory system is involved in. And of course, the final one, protection. Protection against injury, against foreign microbes, toxins. It gives you the ability to blood clot your white blood cells, that line of defense in there that's going to help protect. We're going to go into more detail when we talk about the immune system, about protection. Then we have the plasma. So the blood is made up of about 55% plasma. You can see that here on the picture. So in that 55% that's plasma, you find that there are some significant things. So the first here is albumins. And albumins are primarily, those are involved in most of the plasma proteins. The plasma proteins is primarily And that's a horrible way to write that. Oh, man, let's just completely make that disappear. All right, so we've got the plasma proteins and the albumin, the globulins, which help transport the lipids and the steroids throughout the body, and then fibrinogen, which is going to be used in clotting factors later on. If your blood doesn't have fibrinogen in it, then you can't clot your blood. So that's important. You also have ions and nutrients, of course, in there. The waste product, gases, regulatory substances. One of those important ions that you're going to be carrying, of course, sodium and chlorine, and then bicarbonate, which is wrong thing. Bicarbonate, which is HCO3. And the reason why I'm highlighting the bicarbonate ion is because that is how the body will transport carbon dioxide. So your blood, it transports oxygen to all the parts of the body through the hemoglobin. When it comes back to transport carbon dioxide, it has to have a way of carrying it. It turns it into bicarbonate right here, ion, and then that transports through the plasma itself back to the lungs. It'll be turned back into carbon dioxide and then breathed out there. The final thing is what we call the formed elements. When we look at the formed elements, we're primarily talking about three things. We're talking about platelets, white blood cells, and red blood cells. The platelets are what are pieces of cells that when your body has an injury, they will go to that injury site. They will start releasing a chemical that turns fibrinogen into fibrin, which creates fibers so that your blood clots. And that's how your blood clots. It produces a bunch of these fibers called fibrins, and then it'll stop stuff from leaking out of that area. The white blood cells you can see here, the neutrophils, lymphocytes, monocytes, eosinophils, and basophils. We're going to go into detail on those in the immune system, so I'm not going to talk much about them here. And then the red blood cells, also called erythrocytes. Erythrocytes are very important because they carry the oxygen that your body needs to all the parts of the cell. The erythrocyte of the red blood cell has the hemoglobin in it, and that's what that oxygen is going to bind to go everywhere it needs to go.